Trump made some campaign promises to Israel. Israel is the focus of biblical prophecy. And anything that has to do with Israel is important for biblical prophecy. And he has done something that no president, I don't know if any president has ever stood behind Israel like he's claiming he's going to. Now we'll see what he actually does. But take a look at this list of things that he's promised in his campaign. Of course, he made many promises, and politicians make many promises, right? Not all of them are fulfilled. But these ones that apply to Israel, I think, are extremely important, and this is why. Because the Bible said, if you bless Israel, you will be blessed. And so if our country, instead of always not blessing Israel, if it would bless Israel, we should have a blessing, right? Because according to the Bible, you bless Israel, you'll be blessed as well. The main issue is supporting Israel in the capital city of Jerusalem. Israel as a nation claims that their capital is Jerusalem. Every president has wanted to divide Israel and does not accept Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They don't accept Jerusalem because Jerusalem is in that hot spot. And they say, well, that was by conquest. And it was. It was by conquest. They attacked Israel, and Israel ended up acquiring the land. And remember, in 1967, they took Jerusalem. And then they even gave back the temple site. But they kept Jerusalem. How can any president, all the way down, all the presidents, how could any of them really claim to be Christian when you know that they're going anti-Israel by trying to have Israel fork over the capital, which is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem pops up all over last day prophecy, right? So Israel has to have Jerusalem.
It's a holy city for the Jew, the Christian, and for the Muslims.
Exactly.
All three of them.
Well,
Yeah, Jews, Christians.
it is a holy city for Islam, for Christianity, and for Judaism. But number one, and most important for Israel itself, it has always been, from the time that David first captured it, it's been the capital. In fact, that's where God has placed his name. That's where God built his temple. Israel says it's Jerusalem. The United Nations won't accept it. And our country has never accepted it. That's what we're saying. Okay, so let's look at these campaign promises. Well, the other thing is our president, our country always plays this game where they support Israel, but they support all their enemies as well. In order to force Israel to do what they want, they'll hold back funds that they promised to give them. The latest thing was when Israel got, I think it was missiles, but Obama would not give them the code to type in so they could use the missiles, because they weren't settling on this land split issue of Jerusalem and giving land back to the Muslims. And it was never theirs to begin with. In fact, in 1900, they were supposed to get the whole piece of land out there. And then they gave a big portion to Jordan, and other portions got divided off. And Israel ended up with this small little piece of land, which there's no way, like Obama wanted them to go back to the pre-1967 border. If they did that, they would be totally annihilated. So, and Benjamin Netanyahu and every leader in Israel has known that very well. They're surrounded by, and we've talked about before, we've seen the maps, they're surrounded by millions upon hundreds of millions of Muslims that want to destroy them. And there's little Israel. So anyway, here's Donald Trump, and this was a complete list of Trump's campaign promises to Israel. Now you will see as we go through there's one number that seems to be off. Now, I don't know if they made a mistake and they left one of the items off or the numbers got out of sequence, but you'll see it. But anyway, number 1, the unbreakable bond between the United States and Israel is based upon shared values of democracy, freedom of speech, respect for minorities, cherishing life, and the opportunity for all citizens to pursue their dreams. We have that in common. And we don't have that in common with all those nations around them. And all those nations around them do not have that in common with us. And so we should put them first. They're a democracy. Number 2, Israel is the state of the Jewish people who have lived in that land for 3,500 years. This country has never acknowledged, the president of this country has never acknowledged that before. They count them as living in there since the time that Israel was reestablished. And the Muslims say, no, they never lived there back then. The Muslims say there never was a temple at that time. But here Trump has indicated that he accepts that the Jewish people have lived in that land for 3,500 years. Israel is the state of the Jewish people. The state of Israel was founded with courage and determination by great men and women against enormous odds. It is an inspiration to people everywhere who value freedom and human dignity. Number 3, Israel is a staunch ally of the U.S., a key partner in global war against Islamic jihadism, military. You can't even get the current administration to talk about it. Islamic jihadism. Military cooperation and coordination between Israel and the U.S. must continue to grow. Number 4, the American people value our close friendship and alliance with Israel culturally, religiously, politically. While other nations have required United States troops to defend them, Israelis have always defended their own country by themselves. They only ask for military equipment, assistance, and diplomatic support to do so. The United States does not need to nation build in Israel or send troops to defend Israel. Number 5, the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the American and Israeli government is a good first step, but there is much more to be done. A Trump administration will ensure that Israel receives maximum military, strategic, and tactical cooperation from the United States and the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. MOU will not limit the support that we give. Further, Congress will not be limited to give support greater than that provided by the MOU if it chooses to do so. Israel and the United States benefit tremendously from what each country brings to the table. The relationship is a two-way street. The United States should veto any United Nations votes that unfairly single out Israel and will work in international institutions and forums, including in our relations with the European Union, to oppose efforts to delegitimize Israel, impose discriminatory double standards against Israel, or to impose special labeling requirements on Israeli products or boycotts on Israeli goods. This is one of the things that they've been trying to pressure Israel to work with the Muslims and to leave what they call the lands that don't rightfully belong to them. They say, we're just going to boycott all your goods, and nobody's going to, the United Nations, and nobody's going to be allowed to buy your goods. And so Trump is saying, no, we're going to stand with Israel. We're not going to agree. We're not going to allow that. Number 7, the United States should cut off funds for the United Nations Human Rights Council, a body dominated by countries presently run by dictatorships that seem solely devoted to slandering the Jewish state. UNESCO's attempt to disconnect the state of Israel from Jerusalem is a one-sided attempt to ignore Israel's 3,000-year bond to its capital city and is further evidence of the enormous anti-Israel bias of the United Nations. think it's something like 90% of all the issues that come up in the United Nations have to do with this little land of Israel. They're always, and the United Nations always votes against Israel. The only one that ever comes to their defense is the United States, because they have the veto power. And if we had a president in there that did not support Israel, Israel would be squished like a bug, because the United Nations would step all over him. The United States should view the effort to boycott, divest from, and sanction BDS Israel as inherently anti-Semitic and take strong measures, both diplomatic and legislative, to thwart actions that are intended to limit commercial relations with Israel or persons or entities doing business in Israeli areas in a discriminatory manner. The BDS movement is just another attempt by the Palestinians to avoid having to commit to a peaceful coexistence with Israel. The false notion that Israel is an occupier should be rejected. You hear that all the time on the news. Israel's an occupier, they're an occupier, they're an occupier. Well, actually, if you are a Christian and you look at the Bible, the land grant given to Israel went from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Euphrates River. If you really want to get, what does the Bible say? The main thing is trying to force them. They're not supposed to be a puppet. We're not supposed to have imperialism or imperialistic control over Israel. They're supposed to be independent, and we're not supposed to be forcing them to do what we want when they count on our support for their very survival. And that's the kind of stuff we've been doing. And now there's a guy that wrote this book. I can't remember his name. A few years ago, he wrote this book. And he cited every time the United States went against Israel, something bad happened. One of those things was like in Louisiana when we had Katrina and all the flooding and everything. That was right after we did something to Israel. Hurricanes came right after. And it's very interesting to see, because he's documented them all. And that's why I started us off saying, if we bless Israel, we should be blessed. But when we curse Israel, then bad things do happen to us. Israel is not an occupier. Actually, it is Israel's land. And, if somebody was attacking us, let's say, just crazy, but what if Canada started attacking us? And so we went forward and we pushed them back. And we just happened to stay in the land. I mean, they attacked us, right? Now we acquired some of their land because of war. Would we be an occupier? Or did they lose it? That was their own fault, right? And that's what's happened to Israel. Every time you turn around, Israel is attacked. The Trump administration will ask the Justice Department to investigate coordinated attempts on college campuses to intimidate students who support Israel. Very common today. A two-state solution. This is one of the most important things about Israel. A two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians appears impossible as long as the Palestinians are unwilling to renounce violence against Israel or recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Additionally, the Palestinians are divided between PA rule in the West Bank and Hamas rule in Gaza. There is not a united Palestinian people who could control a second state. Hamas is a U.S.-designated terrorist organization that actively seeks Israel's destruction. We will seek to assist the Israelis and the Palestinians in reaching a comprehensive and lasting peace to be freely and fairly negotiated between those living in the region. But you notice, has nothing to do with splitting Jerusalem.
I Googled Jerusalem. It's that when they established their Israeli state in 1947, Jerusalem was designated the capital of Israel.
Yes.
But then when it started being disputed, they started saying Tel Aviv was the industrial center, but they never called it the capital.
After Israel got that land, they go back and forth. The United Nations has actually robbed Israel of the land that they had. In the beginning, right after World War I, they were given the whole piece, and then they started dividing it up, and Israel wasn't left with very much at all. So the Palestinian leadership, number 11, including the PA, has undermined any chance for peace with Israel by raising generations of Palestinian children on an educational program of hatred of Israel and Jews. The larger Palestinian society is regularly taught such hatred on Palestinian television, in the Palestinian press, in entertainment media, and in political and religious communications. The two major Palestinian political parties, Hamas and Fatah, regularly promote anti-Semitism and jihad. So how can you have peace when they deliberately lie to their children about Israel living there for 3,500 years? They lie about the whole history. They try to change the whole history. And yet, there's no way they can ever have peace. And Trump is saying, Trump admits he agrees with all of this about the Jewish people. The U.S. cannot support the creation of a new state where terrorism is financially incentivized. Terrorists are celebrated by political parties and government institutions, and the corrupt diversion of foreign aid is rampant. The United States should not support the creation of a state that forbids the presence of Christian or Jewish citizens or that discriminates against people on the basis of religion. And every one of those areas, every one of those places, because they're Muslim, they absolutely forbid Christianity and Judaism in their countries. The United States should support direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians without preconditions and will oppose all Palestinian, European, and other efforts to bypass direct negotiations between parties in favor of an imposed settlement. Any solutions imposed on Israel by outside parties, including by the United Nations Security Council, should be opposed. We support Israel's right and obligation to defend itself against terror attacks upon its people and against alternative forms of warfare being waged upon it legally, economically, culturally, and otherwise. Israel's maintenance of defensible borders that preserve peace and promote stability in the region is a necessity. Pressure should not be put on Israel to withdraw to borders that make attacks and conflict more likely. And this is something we have done ever since the beginning. We have been trying to force Israel to withdraw to like these pre-1967 borders, and it makes them absolutely impossible for them to defend themselves. The United States will recognize Jerusalem as the eternal and indivisible capital of the Jewish state, and Mr. Trump's administration will move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Is that cool or what? The United States has refused to do that forever and ever and ever because they do not acknowledge that Jerusalem is the capital. But Trump's administration has promised, we are going to, as a country, going to acknowledge it. We're going to move our embassy there. And if our embassy is right there in Jerusalem, we're going to be protecting our embassy. And so they're going to think twice about trying to invade Jerusalem and send missiles into Jerusalem when our embassy is there and we have to defend it. Despite the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, the United States Department recently designated Iran yet again as a leading state sponsor of terrorism, putting the Middle East particularly, but the whole world at risk by financing, arming, and training terrorist groups operating around the world, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The U.S. must counteract Iran's ongoing violations of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action regarding Iran's quest for nuclear weapons and their non-compliance with past and present sanctions, as well as the agreements they signed, and implement tough new sanctions when needed to protect the world and Iran's neighbors from its continuing nuclear and non-nuclear threats. These are really bold. These are really bold statements. And basically what it's doing is it's telling the whole world and all Israel's enemies, it's saying, no matter where, no matter what, we want it very clear. When you attack Israel, you're attacking us. It's kind of like, if you're the big brother, John, and you got the little brother, and the little brother goes to school and he's getting picked on, and all of a sudden big brother John said, I just want you to make it clear.
Big John.
You hit little John, Big John's coming after you, right?
How does Ambassador Stevens feel about that protection?